Welcome, Mitch. We'll talk about 26,000, maybe 27 now, lines of data.
All right, thanks, Phil. Hey, everybody. I'm so glad everybody could come join us tonight, and I hope everybody's good, staying safe, and everybody's feeling all right. I'm really glad to be able to be here today and do my first meetup without pants. Uh, but yeah, I think we should just jump in. If you have questions, please just drop them in the chat and I'll try to get to them right away. I love just having these sorts of conversations. So 26,000 lines of React Native. I'm Mitch. I'm the CTO over at EEON. It's a new startup, and I'll show you guys the website. For anyone that invests in stocks or anything, we are basically trying to take a Bloomberg and put it on your phone. There's not a whole lot of great accessible mobile tools that don't cost $1,000 a month. So we built in some kind of sophisticated functionality where you can compare stocks on any metric with heat maps, a lot of live charts, real-time data, stock screeners, 3 years of financials, whatever, a bunch of this stuff. And yeah, we actually just got approved in the App Store today, which is awesome. And we'll be releasing it this week. So if I hop back over, we just have a couple things to talk about. Thank you. Thank you, Baron. So a couple things to talk about today. And yeah, maybe we'll build a feature for EON Live. I got a bug report yesterday, so I think we could go fix it. So like I said, we are trying to take a Bloomberg and put it on your phone. If you all know what Robinhood is, they basically took trading and made it free. And now most of the big brokerages have followed suit. But their research and analysis tools are kind of subpar. And it still amazes me that people are like, oh, it has to be mobile optimized, or we need a mobile responsive site. Because 60 to 70% of all web traffic, aside from streaming and stuff, is on the phone. That's where people spend all their time. So it's crazy to me not to target that class of device. And things like Bloomberg or Y charts or all this sort of stuff is like $1,000 a month, which is just inaccessible for normal people. So we had to build this app using React Native. It is myself, and then I've had one awesome technical advisor, guru sort of guy who's been in the fintech space for a long time and has built some pretty complicated, very popular systems. But the two of us together had a ton of work to do. We needed database, backend, infrastructure. We're on AWS, and we needed to build this mobile client. We're building a web client. We need an admin panel. We built a Slack integration. Ton of stuff that we needed to do in just a couple months. So this really led to some tough decisions, and everyone knows that engineering is just, a series of decisions and trade-offs, and what could we do to build our product without going crazy? And we kind of took these decisions and distilled them into 4 principles that we've used to build this. The first is really focusing on onboardability. So everything we do, from the code to the infrastructure to the documentation, all has to be understandable, not complex, and be able to onboard somebody in a week and have them understand everything. And that's been a real challenge, but it's been an excellent guiding light for us. The second is features diverge. So, if you've ever built a complicated page with user accounts or something, you might be tempted to have my account and other people's accounts, look the exact same if you're able to search for users and stuff and use the same components. But eventually, those features and everything else that starts out looking similar is going to diverge. So that's led to Principle 2.5, which is like dry code that everyone strives for, and it's amazing, and it's pushed on us by our tech overlords at Facebook and Google and stuff. Might not be the most productive way for John and I to build this system because we know things are going to diverge. So we ended up doing a lot of copy and paste. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And the last principle is everything right now is product centric. We will get to a place where there's an entire data plane and things are better organized, but in order to be productive on the product, we built everything to drive that that need and the ability to develop features quickly. So let's just hop into a quick architecture overview. Okay, no questions. Oh, I already have this up. So from an architecture standpoint, everyone screams about microservices and service-oriented architecture. And oh my God, if you're not doing that, you're crazy. Well, like color us crazy because we started building with a monolith and we have everything contained in there. And we've got a couple separate deployments of it for redundancy and a couple feature flags where some instances handle different sorts of tasks. But using a monolith instead of a service-oriented architecture removed an entire class of problems for us around network monitoring and different failure modes and stuff like that. So we tried to go very simple toward this goal of onboardability. And with that, we have a couple different data providers, data stores. They're in AWS. We're using RDS, and then we also have a Redis cache in Redis Labs. We've got a couple third-party services for emails and Stripe for payment processing. And then inside this monolith, we've got a couple different modules, a couple different parts of the code. We have a data access layer that manages talking to the database and warming the cache and everything. Scheduled jobs. We have a lot of stuff that we have to do on a recurring basis because we're a fintech thing, so we have to pull earnings and all this sort of stuff. Third-party clients, which live by themselves and just expose a minimal interface of functions. And then we decided to go with GraphQL, sticking with the product-driven mantra, because Rust is great. It's amazing. I've done a talk on this before that I think Bill might have recorded. We might have it somewhere. But GraphQL, to me, is a very product-minded way to build a backend to support all the different clients that you will. We also have we expose a REST API, and we take in webhooks from various things. And this isn't to say that the system is simple, because it's certainly not. There's a lot here, a lot of code, and it's been hard to build. But I think it still falls within the category of onboardable, because nothing in it of itself is really overwhelming. And then we have a slew of different clients, like I talked about, the mobile, the web, Slack, and the admin panel. And one of the best things we did, seriously, if you guys have ever had to like copy constants from one project to another, and you're sending different strings back and forth over the wire, it's kind of a pain. So we developed this library called constants and utils, which has like a couple constants that we use throughout all the different clients in the backend, as well as some utilities that are just commonplace everywhere. And that's that. It's pretty straightforward from like architecture perspective. If you guys, oh, hold on. From Todd, how do you do job scheduling? Yeah, so good question, Todd. Right now we use a Redis-backed queue system, and there's a couple of them that are available. We evaluated a couple and went with Bull, which is pretty good. It's worked pretty reliably, and we have a monitoring system there for failures and retries and stuff. And that's because it let us be really productive on the product and build this backend and the scheduled jobs really quickly. Eventually, that'll get moved to a Kafka or a Rabbit or something that supports more scale. But the focus here was really on building the product and eliminating classes of errors that we want to deal with at this point. So everyone good on the architecture side? Yeah, cool. Go with Kafka over Rabbit. Thank you. I'll keep it in mind, Todd. Okay, so let's hop back. So yeah, everything that we have in the back end, and you'll see in the front end too, is totally separate. We did a lot of copy pasta. It is not dry because today's modules and functions will just become tomorrow's subsystems. So this is one of the big decisions we made about like, let's go super simple. Let's copy the code where it's appropriate because it's just going to change. There's so many unknowns, like like everyone has. And I really, really like this quote by Sandy Metz. If you guys are familiar with the Rails community at all, she's a huge figure in it, popular books and talks and whatnot. Duplication is far cheaper than the wrong abstraction. And this doesn't just apply to backend stuff. This is huge in the React ecosystem. And I think we'll talk about that right now. Yeah, okay, excellent. So everyone here, I'm assuming, has written React in some form or another. And you might have a component that looks like this. It's a title, it goes at the top of a page, color and size, and that's cool. Perfect. And that's a very reasonable abstraction. And then like next week, somebody says, oh, hey, can we add like 4 pixels of padding on the bottom of that? It's like, all right, sure, I guess. So now you're passing a new Boolean flag for padding bottom. Okay, not the end of the world, like fine, the abstraction still works. And then a week later, somebody says, oh, hey, can you take out that divider too? And now it starts to become a little bit of a mess because you're like, why is the title managing the divider sort of cruft? And have y'all seen something like this where you're passing flags and changing the code path and then it can pretty quickly become unmanageable when you've got all these sort of props thrown in there. And I'm not saying we don't do this, but I would really like not to, because this is where the abstraction really breaks down. Just build something specific and copy paste for the different use cases. Because you get this like combinatorial explosion of props, which makes it really tough to test, really tough to debug, because like the amount of code paths here are 2 to the what 2 to the n, or however many possible permutations you have, combinations, whatever. This is the wrong abstraction, and we've kind of tried to stay away from that with our lack of dry code, where we're copying and pasting for specific situations. And that's not like a best practice, that's just what we did to build quickly. All good? Sweet. Thumbs up. Excellent. Oh, wait. Yeah, like this to me is death by dry with the worst emoji that they've come out with. So now let's get into some React stuff, some React Native stuff. Yeah. So for the React Native app that we built, we made a couple decisions again so that we could go quickly. And they might not be the best thing in the long term, but they've worked for us for now. The first decision there is Expo, if you've all heard of that, which is a fabulous tool on top of the React Native. Some people call it Rails for React Native, where it abstracts away a lot of the configuration details that you might normally have to deal with. And things like push notifications, maps, and even deployment has just been an absolute breeze through Expo. They've got a whole suite of tools. It's free to use. It's all node-based, and it is really fantastic. I couldn't recommend it highly enough. Now, I think I skipped ahead a little bit, but we'll go back in a sec. We also chose GraphQL, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then this pattern we've been using called data hooks. It's really just a set of custom hooks, but you'll see how heavily we use them and how it's really helped us modularize and move fast. And then the way that we organize our components and screens and whatnot. And this is, again, just what we did. I can't say if it's a good practice or not, but it's worked really well for us. So for Expo, like I talked about, it's a layer on top of React Native that makes the development experience super smooth. It does have some limitations though, which is that you can really only use the native modules that come bundled with Expo. And if you need to use something outside of that, tough luck. It's kind of like Create React app with the ability to customize the build process, where if you need something that they don't support, you have to eject, which, you lose some of the benefits of it. It's still a nice workflow, but we lean heavily on Expo. It's been amazing in terms of push notifications, the development experience. They've got a great client app. So as you're coding on your computer, the rest of your team can just pull up the app on their phone and watch your changes live, as well as they take care of deployment to the App Store for you. You just say Expo build iOS, and do some magic behind the scenes where they generate provisioning profiles and signing certificates and all this stuff that can be really painful. And it's just gone. It's really fantastic. If it suits your use case and you're not going to go outside of their bounds. The second thing we chose was GraphQL, which is just an amazing technology that's taken over the world. And I'm sure you've all heard about it, whether or not you've used it. It's really fantastic. It's kind of an alternative to REST, where there's only one endpoint and the client specifies what fields it wants back. So you don't have any overfetching or underfetching, and it gives you a strongly typed interface to your API. And we'll talk about why that's important. And for the GraphQL use case for us, we use the Apollo client, which is an amazing tool for interacting with GraphQL APIs. Sorry, let me back up a sec. Apollo is which is like the GraphQL company. They specialize in all things GraphQL monitoring. They've got clients for all the different front-end frameworks and back-end languages. They're really fantastic. But React Apollo lets you automatically query your back-end API, and then it manages a cache for you. And when I talked about having a strongly typed interface to your API, when you have strong typing and unique for the elements you're sending back, you get automatic caching and automatic cache updates. So with React Apollo, we took out the need for state management. We don't do almost anything manually. When we make an update, the updated data is automatically merged into the cache, and the entire app re-renders where it has to. And again, it's an amazing way to build. It's totally changed my view on things and has let us build the product really quickly compared to doing manual state management. Okay. Read their docs. They've got excellent tutorials. They fully embrace hooks. It's awesome. And we'll use it a little bit when we live code a feature. Data hooks. Is everyone familiar with React hooks? After it came out in 16.8, it was kind of a revolutionary thing that let you bring state into your functional components. There's a couple hooks built into React, and then you can also write custom hooks, and that's what we're going to talk about. The data hooks pattern that we've been using separates all of our code into logical units, which really supports onboardability, future feature divergence, and a strong interface to work with the data that we get back from our API. And if you studied computer science in school or have read any textbooks like The Gang of Four or anything, they had this idea of high cohesion and low coupling, which to me for a long time was just some jargon, but it is a really interesting way to think about keeping the functions and data that are related together, but don't intermix that into the view layer. It's really like an MVC. It relates to the MVC concept where your models and your data are separate from your view. Rely on the other two heavily. And that's what data hooks has done for us. So if this looks we'll run through it real quick. This is Apollo code about fetching some sort of data from an API. So say we are or component or something, and we need a couple details about the user. The way the Apollo client works is we can use a React hook for that. So we're going to use a query, which in GraphQL is analogous to a GET request, and pass it some sort of template, which is really just a string noting which fields we want to get from our API. So if we're logged in looking at a user profile, I want myself, and out of myself, I want my avatar, ID, first name, and last name. And this is all right. It's pretty cool because the data that we need for the component lives directly with the component. And that's pretty awesome. There's no reducers or actions or any of this stuff. It's all right here. And then the data, error, and loading states are all just injected right in via the hook. And you can manage them how you want to. It's really a pretty cool thing. And then once the data has resolved through this like async call, we can say data.me.firstname, data.me.lastname. And this is great. And I see a lot of this in people that are using React, and there's various other data fetching libraries that use hooks, except that what you're really doing here is coupling your data to the interface and to the component. So you need to know how to grab the first and last name out of data here, which is all right. You know, this is much better than some of the other patterns that we have, but maybe it's not ideal, or in my mind isn't ideal. We couldn't build as quickly using this. So what we do, which is a little different, the custom hook or the data hook pattern, as we call it, is we write a custom hook, which basically wraps the query. So now we abstract the template and we abstract this like the query into its own hook. And then our component becomes a little simpler because there's no more template. We're not making a query directly. We're just saying, hey, get me. And we can manage our loading and error states right there. But we still have to know how to get the first name and last name. So we could even take this a step further and use the custom hook to run whatever sort of transforms we need so that the data here is really fully decoupled from the view layer. And we just say, all right, the hook knows how to extract the full name, and we can pass that directly into the component, which reduces the number of render cycles and the logic that has to live in the view layer of your app. Cool, good. This is just one example from Todd. I'm not familiar with GraphQL. Do you have SQL injection attacks when you get the first name and last name? Thank you, Ari. So Todd, yeah, GraphQL isn't necessarily going to help you with SQL injection attacks. People can still put in malformed data, so it is still up to you to sanitize your inputs. As another example, here's something that you might see in a common app. In this component, this same user profile, we are adding the ability to change your avatar or your profile picture or something. And then the component can become a little crazy because not only do you have the same query template that we used in the last example, but now you need the ability to make a mutation. A mutation is like analogous to a put, post, or delete. It changes data while queries just get data. So, if we were just doing this the normal way, have a query here, which gets me, and then we might define our mutation, which returns a tuple of the function to run. It's an async function, and then the error and the loading state. And this might look a little foreign if you're not used to it, and that's okay. Apollo does a really nice job of explaining this. But basically what we're doing is defining a mutation and saying, this is what we want to run. Give us a function that's able to do that. So then inside this component, we have to create a function that knows how to say, okay, let me go pick an image, upload that image to S3, and then run the mutation to save that new uploaded image ID to the user. And this is a little painful. It can really expand the logic in your component, and this definitely couples like the image picker and S3 directly into the component instead of keeping those concerns separate. You're really like polluting the view with all of this like library style functionality. So what we can do is take that same pattern and abstract it into one of our data hooks. So instead of keeping everything in the component, we can create a new data hook, which is only responsible for updating the avatar, where it knows how to run this mutation, or it knows how to, and it creates a function to update the avatar, where the image picker and S3 are all encapsulated inside this hook. Those implementation details are never actually brought out into the view layer. They live behind the scenes. And then our component really becomes a lot simpler because we can say, all right, let's use our use me hook and then our use update avatar hook, which just returns a function to do what we want. And this is where you really get the power of custom hooks and this data hook pattern that we've been using, where it's all about encapsulating logic in the hook and exposing a very bare, unchanging interface to the view. Because you can change this all day long. If we don't want to use S3 anymore and we want to use Cloudinary or File Stack or something, go do it. Nothing has to change in the component, which is pretty awesome. And these hooks are standalone and testable, and you can use them wherever you want. It doesn't have to be isolated to here, like the use me hook. If we changed it a little bit to be able to pass in a user ID, we could use this on any screen where we want to see a specific user. It's fantastic, and it's worked out really well for us. And we're actually going to write a custom data hook in a minute. Before we do that, I just want to talk a little bit about how we write components and screens and stuff. Has anyone heard of atomic design? Let me check the chat real quick. So atomic design, I don't know, last year, it's basically classifying the types of components you write by how simple they are, how much they do. I don't know. I don't know what to say there, but they break it down like this. Atoms are the very simplest thing you can have. Modules are a group of atoms. Organisms can be a group of molecules. Then you go to a big jump into templates and pages. But basically, what we decided to do was anything above organisms, templates, and pages actually gets a little too dry for us because we know that these features are going to diverge over time. So I don't want to write an entire page or an entire template that's going to have like no divider, no padding, and have this big explosion of code paths in the view layer. So we at EEON basically stick to atoms and molecules. And those are and I'll show you guys how we do that. Also, the components we have are localized. So we kind of use a nested directory structure for components that are only used for a specific use case. And I'll show you that. And it is not by any means dry. We copy ourselves all over the place. And it kind of works. So let's build something. Let's dive in a little bit. I've got the app here. Let me hide this. Okay. Can everybody see this? I can't see you. Let me check this. All right, awesome. So this is the app. If you like investing, we think it's pretty cool. It's the investing tool that we've always wanted, and we just want to give it to everyone. Quick over the stocks that you care about in heat map form. We've got our own curated lists and stuff for you to dive into. And then you can see other users' profiles and get into what they are interested in, which is pretty cool. And see their sort of lists and sort by any metric that you want. Whatever. Shameless plug over. So yesterday, I got a bug report from one of our users. It said that right now I'm on the basic plan, which limits me to only 2 watch lists and 2 stock screeners. But if you went in to create a new type of list, a new watch list or a new screener, it wouldn't block you, which isn't ideal. We can't have people on the basic plan taking advantage of this and just creating more and more lists. So we need to block this. Now, I talked a lot about how we were, okay, sweet. I talked a lot about how we were super product focused, and you can really, really see that in terms of our API. So part of GraphQL is that it's strongly typed. And because it's strongly typed, you can introspect the API and auto-generate documentation. And that's what a bunch of tools do that for you. Apollo does it by default. And we can use a documentation or an API Explorer tool. This one is called Altair. I like it a lot. There's also Graphical or GraphQL Playground. But let's hop into this for a sec. We've got a bunch of different queries, which are like GET requests, and they all serve very specific product-focused purposes. The one I'm looking for right now is me. So when you're logged in, you'll be able to run the me query. And you can get all sorts of stuff through this. For example, I want my avatar, and that's all I want. And it gives me a link to the avatar. I want to know, do I have a discount? And sorry, that might have been the wrong one to do. And a lot of APIs will return you first name and last name. Cool, great. But most of the time you have to concat that on the front end. So what if instead I want the full name? And this is what I'm talking about in terms of getting really product focused. Don't make more work than there has to be. Just get the full name. And now for the event of our evening, I want to know, I want the permissions. What can this user do? Can they create a user watch list? Can they create a user screener list? We're trying to minimize the interface between the back end and the front end so that we just can focus, that the front end, the product, the user-facing stuff, can just focus on what it needs. Off technical topic, it does just limit space markets right now, but we've got plans for international markets as well. Good question. So let's go integrate this. Let's see. So the screen we are talking about is called the Select List Type screen. Okay, and basically what we want to do is if people are on the basic plan and they don't have permissions to create a new list, we just want to block these out and prompt them to upgrade. But to do that, we need to get their permissions. So we need a new custom data hook. Now, y'all can see on the left here, we use data hooks for literally everything. We abstract all of the API and some state management logic in here where we can just get the data we want on any screen super easily. And if it's already in the Apollo cache, it doesn't even need to make a request, which is awesome. Okay, so let's create, I think I actually already created a file for this. Let's create a new data hook. So I want to import get from lodash get. I want to import GQL from GraphQL tag. Import use query from @Apollo template GQL. And then we want to run the query me. I want my ID. We need the ID there so that this strongly typed user with a unique ID gets automatically merged into the cache. Do I find it hard to navigate with that many hooks? I don't personally, because they all serve one specific purpose. And that's worked out really well for us. We try and do, I don't care if we have to integrate a lot of hooks into each individual component, but as long as they serve one purpose and have a single responsibility, I've found that it works pretty well. Ari, we can talk about this in a minute. So me, ID, great. Then I want the permissions, can create user. That gives you autocomplete on your queries and stuff. I don't use it. To each their own. Use permissions. Const data error loading. Use query template. And we can control how we want this data to get cached. I want to make sure that every time I look at this page, it has the freshest data. I don't need it to look cache. It's a pretty simple request. So I'm going to say fetch policy is network only. It will remake this request every time so that we're never showing stale data here. And then I want to say permissions equals get data me permissions with a default value. Return permissions, export default, use permissions. And if we want to manage error and loading states here, we can as well. Let's leave that for now and head to the select list type. And here what y'all can see is those primitives that I talked about. Just atoms. Sounds like screaming architecture. Yeah, I think it's similar there to the screaming architecture. What we can see here is we don't have a lot of like huge components that take a ton of props. I would say one of the biggest ones is this option icon button, which is just an icon button. But everything is pretty much an atom or a molecule according to atomic design. And then these list type options fall into the nested structure I was talking about, where each screen will have its own components folder for things that live specifically to that, because I don't need them polluting the like the global components folder. It's just unnecessary. So we do this really heavily on things like the dashboard, where components, and then inside this folder you could have more components, which can have more components, because like we did not go super dry and abstract these into things that'll change later. And it's really easy, exactly what you're looking for. So now let's integrate that hook. Const use permissions, and then out of this I want can create user watch list, can create user screener list. I want to plop this right into the disabled. So it's disabled if they can't create it, and it's disabled if they can create user screener list. Save that up, made the request, and just like that, we have like blocking or permissions, and you can basically do this with anything, and we pretty much did. And then we can come in here. The credit card and the coupon are all pulled via data hooks. We can upgrade this. And then we're right back here. The data was automatically refetched. We had a re-render, and we're able to do what we want because we upgraded to the professional plan. If I come back into the settings and manage subscription and downgrade again, we come back here, we are now back on the basic plan and we can't make these lists. And this has been a really awesome way to build that's enabled us to be super productive because everything is just its own hook. It encapsulates a ton of logic in here. And let me find another example. If we look to the profile, to my account, we can have multiple data hooks in here all at the same time. These ones manage their own loading state, where we've got a full screen blocking loader. It's kind of been a really nice way to build, where we're making separate requests for the data, so no payload is too large, and everything has a single responsibility. There's something specific I'm trying to find, which is, I want to say it's in the, like I talked about being dry, we have two different user information components, one for my account and one for other user profile. But in this, what we talked about with the change avatar data hook, we use it. Use avatar operations. Use avatar operations, which knows how to, it defines a mutation, it knows what to do in the case of an error, and then it knows how to manage its own loading state, pick an image, upload to Cloudinary. We use Cloudinary for our image store, and then run the mutation to update the avatar and track an event and show a success modal. And this has been super awesome and a really fast way to encapsulate logic and this component or this view layer stuff with extra logic. So I see a question down here. As the code base has grown with hooks, do you have to put a test frame or some kind of sanity test framework for your changes? Yeah, so that's an awesome question, Todd. Just today, I actually broke a bunch of tests, so I'm not going to run them right now, but I just want to talk about it for a sec. I know a lot of people subscribe to the testing pyramid, where there's very few end-to-end tests, a little more integration tests, and then the most unit tests. And this can give you a lot of code coverage, which is cool. It's not really the metric I use. What we kind of subscribe to is the testing diamond, testing diamond code. I don't have a great example right now, but it looks more like a diamond where you have a couple end-to-end tests, a whole lot of integration tests, and then kind of a few unit tests. And I do that because the integration tests are really what helps me sleep at night. At the end of the day, if something is a couple pixels off, that's okay. Or if something didn't get formatted quite right, it's not good by any means, but we'll report it and we'll fix it. Login is working and people can sign up and our data is correct. That's the way so far. I'm sure over time we'll increase test coverage, but this has kind of been our methodology up until now. Is that good, Todd? Maybe send a chat. Okay, awesome. Thanks. So just like that, we've gone through the architecture. We talked a little about GraphQL, and we fixed a bug in like we fixed a bug in like 30 lines of code that has to do with permissions. And of course, we have more permissions and checks on the back end to make sure that someone can't just hit the API and do this. But this is pretty cool and really productive. So, you know, if it's a best practice or not, I don't know. But it's been a best practice for our team, and we've really enjoyed it. So I'll just hop back here and say pattern and not saying dry and everything. We've got pretty solid on. If you're looking for a specific piece of data, look for the hook. And in terms of the backend, you want a specific piece of data in the data access layer, which is really just a bunch of repeated code for different types of assets. And the other thing about the data pattern is that those hooks, because they're not coupled to any sort of view layer stuff, are completely reusable across all of our different clients. The web, mobile, admin panel, and Slack. Like they've been awesome for that. But we know that the admin panel might diverge from the web app and from the mobile app. So we do just copy paste them. We didn't use a shared library for those. And you know, that speaks to the divergence here. And as you can see from the API, with the full name field and the way permissions are set up and how easy that is to consume, everything is product centric and product driven. So that is basically all I have. I hope it was useful to you guys, and I think there were some really good questions, and I'm happy to take any more, but otherwise, Bill?
That was a great presentation. Really learned a lot. I encourage everyone to go check out your app as soon as it is out.
Soon this week, I think.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess let's open it up for questions. A couple more coming in here.
Yeah. So Todd asks, what are we using to track bugs? Todd, are you talking about like in the code doing error reporting, or like our from users? That also, while we've been in beta, we've been talking to our users all the time, and that was just something one of them reported. So that they know it's been fixed or working. We just let them know personally. Sometimes we'll shoot out an email, but no strict process that way. For automated bug reporting and error reporting, we use Sentry, which has a really nice Expo integration. Look in the app. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I'm not going to pull it up because it has my private keys in there. But there's a really nice Expo Sentry integration that automatically handles source maps, and it's just a little piece of a config file. So that's how we handle that in an automated way. Got it. Any other questions? I think you can all see here, we have a ton of data hooks, and it's basically where all of the logic of our application lives. Everything else is basically just presentational. From managing authentication to, we've got something where you can decide what lists, where you can decide what lists show up on your dashboard. And to manage that, we've got a hook. We've got two separate hooks actually called use add dashboard list, which knows how to make a mutation. It does some optimistic responses so that the UI feels really snappy. And then it knows how to track an event and manage its loading state. And then when these red buttons are clicked, dashboard list, same thing. We can just remove it. Or it'll have a bug. We'll see. These things always happen. But yeah, this has been a really kind of cool pattern for us.
Are you using the same code for your mobile app and web app?
What's that, Bill?
There's a question here. Are you using the same code for your mobile app and web app?
We are not. Expo has a way that you can use the same code and it will automatically generate a PWA, a progressive web app. And we're thinking about doing that for Android. Right now, we don't support Android because the ecosystem is much harder to build for. But no, we don't. We have a total web app, which is a Next.js app. Hold on. I can show you something. That follows very much the same pattern and uses the same sort of hooks that we've copied and pasted directly from the mobile right in here. And that's to support a couple neat features that we have in here, actually. We built a tracker which maps, COVID cases to the major market indices, which is kind of cool. In case you were curious on that, but all the data is provided using the data hooks pattern. We've also got, this is real. So I could find Apple, and we allow people to create their own charts and export them and stuff. But this is not a plug about EEON. This is really talking about how give me this code. Use securities. Same pattern everywhere. And it's not super dry. We could probably abstract this into like a function which automatically builds hooks on caching stuff, but in the long term. So this is what we've gone with.
Awesome. There's one other one here. How did you get from idea? Did you have any faults, etc.?
Wait, what? Sorry, what's that?
How did you get from the idea to the current state? Did you have any false starts, etc.?
Oh my God. Yeah, a lot of false starts. I quit my job back in June, and my expenses are pretty low. And I haven't gotten paid for 10 months, and around on this every day. And now we're starting to talk to some investors, and we're finally getting on the App Store. And it's just been a lot of hard work and definitely a lot of false starts, a ton of back end work I had to redo. But luckily, the choices that we made front end with these sort of modular hooks and staying not dry have worked out really well for us. So no big hiccups on the front end yet, but on the back end, there was a lot of rework that had to be done.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
One more here. Do you try to limit your use of use debug value in your custom hooks?
You use debug value. Do you try and limit your use of use debug value? I don't know what that is. To show the state of the hook. I don't use it personally. I'll look into it. But I can't speak to that. Okay, cool. Yeah, well, if there's anything else, I'm happy to talk about it. And thank you, thanks, Matt. If anybody wants, to talk more about the patterns or the app or anything, just shoot me an email at mitch@eon.com, and I'm happy to talk about it. And I'd love to see what you all are working on. And thank you, Todd. I'd love to see what you all are working on, and this has been great. Thank you for having me.
Cool.
Talk. That was great.
Yeah,
Awesome.
definitely.
Thanks. I'm going to stop screen sharing.
I'm gonna stop recording.
Oh, I see. Oh, all right. Now I can see everybody. This is nice.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to hang out and talk, I'll hang out. I don't know about, but
I'll hang out. Do you write custom hooks? Is that something that's popular where you all work?
You guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I work at AT&T, and we've done some work with React and making custom hooks for some of the cellular. I work on the cellular side, so we do some work developing tools for network engineers to use and things like that. So we've written a bunch of stuff, but because it's AT&T, they frown upon the use of Facebook because it's the evil empire. So they gotta roll their own, and it's never works out the right way. So it is what it is. Sometimes you can build stuff and they don't know it's React. So if they don't, what the executives don't know, don't hurt them.
Okay. Gotcha.
No, I was just interested because one of the challenges I've had with trying to do custom hooks, it almost like when you got to a point where you got like spaghetti code everywhere, and you're like, what is going on? What data am I passing? And when you said, the end-to-end testing, that's where it's a nightmare because we look at a data value that's picked up and then migrated through everything and then it's hit the tech. So he's trying to make some decision, and suddenly the value's off, and you're like, where did it get lost in the sauce? And suddenly you're like, come on. So that's where you got to put you're trying to put debug statements in everywhere. It's like this is a nightmare.
Yeah, I totally feel that. I've run into a couple cases where, I am getting stale data. From what I found, it's bugs in the Apollo cache.
Right.
Yeah, but overall, I like it, and it's worked pretty well. So 80-20 sort of stuff.
Right. When you picked that cache, did you look at other caches to use, Memcache or why did you pick that one over some of the other ones that were out there?
Well, wait, did you say Memcache?
Yeah, some of the other cache models or things like that.
Well, so in terms of Apollo cache I think there's a couple alternatives, which is their in-memory cache, and then a new cache called Hermes. Memcache is really a back-end thing.
Right.
Yeah, but this is an in-memory cache that lives on the client, where the data from that's returned from the API is automatically merged into, and then that kind of controls the render cycle of your app. So I don't think Memcache is an alternative, but there are a couple we could look into. But I found that the in-memory cache from Apollo, just the default one, has worked fine.
Yeah, the other thing I asked about was why'd you pick, for your message queue? Because we have both Kafka and RabbitMQ. We've been smoked by RabbitMQ with problems at the Erlang. That turned out to be at the hardware we were running it on. We had to do the thing. We were running it on Solaris because that was the service we had, and we discovered there were problems at the hardware layer, and Erlang couldn't fix it. And Pivotal they basically bailed on us, so we had to literally migrate everything over. And that's how we wound up on Kafka. We discovered it was a lot better, a lot smoother. RabbitMQ is lightweight and slick, but I just trying to debug Erlang issues when you start going into the nitty-gritty of it becomes a nightmare, and we don't have any of those problems in Kafka.
I see. I missed that part of your question, but I understand now. Yeah. I chose the Redis-backed queue just because like the ease of implementation and the ease of setup. I didn't really want to deal with Kafka or Rabbit with the brokers and the messages and all that sort of stuff. I think when we do, and you're dealing with unimaginable scale from my perspective.
Right, and I can see why you would go with Redis from that for that exact point. It's super easy to set up, but at some point, are you going to look at the point where you're like, hey, we're starting to run into a performance issue, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, I think in the, not the short term, but like probably sometime in the next year, we'll think about going to a Rabbit or a Kafka or a Kinesis or something like that. Yeah. It's just a scale consideration for now, which I don't really think we need. And I've seen Redis do some pretty amazing things on the order of like, tens of millions of operations a second. But at some point we'll have to get there.
Yeah.
But Redis has actually been a really useful choice for us because we use it for streaming real-time data as well as the queues as well as some pub sub stuff. So just having all of that in one has been awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, totally.
And if you ever need help with like crowd testing, or one of the reasons why I was asking some of the security questions because AT&T, everything's driven into like DevSecOps model, where it's constantly like, if I'm doing this, do I have a unit test to show that I tested it? Because if I don't, then the guys over at Alien Vault, the cybersecurity guys, they live to make your life miserable, and it's what they do. And I don't blame them, but sometimes you're like, really, dude, come on.
I think we just live in different worlds, man.
I know. But the reason why I was bringing it up because the fintech area, I know that's the area that everyone is like, life safety, your cell phone most sport, and money. Right, my money has to be in my bank. So that's one of the things I was asking about from a different spec model with a fintech like stock trading and things like that.
So that's actually where we had a big win, and it was a big decision for us of whether or not we wanted to build a brokerage or not, using any of the new like brokerage APIs that have come out. And everyone's building a new checking account or whatever. We are not. We are just focused on like a better mobile research platform for now, and eventually we'll do some sort of Plaid integration or something, so then we can auto-generate watch lists for you and whatnot. But we haven't done it for now, so it hasn't been a big consideration, but it will be later on.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, man. Talk to you guys. Good meeting. Thanks.
Thanks, Todd.
Cool.
All right, couple stragglers.
Yeah.
Well, this was good, Bill. Was
Yeah.
it all right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was pleasantly surprised that Expo held up. Or not Expo.
Me
WebEx.
too. I mean, it's been great for us, and the deployment is so easy. And you guys use a lot of custom hooks over at Yum?
No. And what's funny is so we have a legacy app, and in that legacy app, it was using more of like a services type of pattern. Like you basically create a class, right, and it's got some methods, right, or functions. And what's funny is we're starting over from scratch, and we're rebuilding the UI and all that. We're using all the latest stuff. We're using hooks, but we're not really using any custom hooks. I'm a big fan of what you're showing. I remember when you demoed it to me when we were at the bar that one time.
Yeah.
And I love it. I'm all if I don't know if it was me. I just don't have a lot of time to get down into the code anymore. But if it was me, I'd be doing something similar like that. But right now, what they're doing is like the only thing they're able to salvage from the legacy code base is really these services. That's the only thing they're really taking over, and they're just for some reason they're staying with that pattern.
Well, I think the services, like I've seen services work as well, and they're good. The whole thing to me is just decoupling the UI from the data, and like I don't want components to have to be like me dot user dot first name dot blah. That sucks. I just want just give me what I want, and that's where the custom hooks has really been so valuable to us.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. I kind of wanna try it on my own little pet project.
Well, I mean, you saw it. It takes it's 20 lines of code to build something. Yeah, and I think it works really well with the GraphQL stuff. But there's also I've seen a lot of hook-based, just like REST fetching libraries coming out that have a very similar interface to them.
Yeah, no, I've seen it too. I've been tempted.
Mhm.
For Expo though, there was never any time where you were tempted to eject.
There were two times. One was, two very specific times. I would really like to use either Apple Pay or like the native Stripe module, but to use the deployment and the push notifications and everything.
Yeah.
And then the second one, I'm blanking, but that was the real one that almost got me. Yeah. Overall, it's been fabulous though. I really enjoy working with it.
You ever talk to Peter at CarCheck?
Yeah, sometimes. I think their stuff has come along pretty well. He was a contributor, I think.
Yeah. He was like one of the first users, he claims. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think he said he was the first user.
Yeah. I don't have a way of.
Yeah, I don't know. Don't need to challenge him, but no, I think everything's going really well. I'm super excited to get accepted. There's two outstanding bugs I have to fix before we submit. But Expo also gives us like the over-the-air deployments, so I don't even have to resubmit to the App Store. I just push to a specific like branch, and then it's just in there, which is awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What about Android?
Sorry. You know what? It's so hard to build for with like the differences in hardware manufacturers and software vendors and stuff. And people like implement their image pickers differently. So you have to do all this platform specific stuff. And I'm like, forget it. Like, I'll just build a web app. And then obviously it's going to be mobile responsive and just tell Android people to go get it. Maybe I'll put a manifest on it so it's a PWA or something. But I just couldn't bring myself to do it.
No, but I just thought I would play devil's advocate.
Look, a lot more Android users in the world than iPhone. And I think it's a cool platform, but it's just talk about trying to be productive. It'd take me 6 more months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's just how Facebook is always in the whole 85% same code, right? Both platforms.
I mean, sure, maybe if you're doing simple things. But I mean, we're able to, what I'm super pleased with is being able to share our data hooks across our various clients. Because just a copy paste and immediately you have like search. And that's a total breeze, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My buddy Brian is asking about there's a Git repo with most of the patterns that you used.
I can't say. I don't know. I don't know if this is like a thing that a lot of people do. I just kind of was messing around and came up with it one day. But I can send you a file if you want. I can send you a screenshot of something.
Is there any screenshots in your slides here? I was trying to.
Oh yeah, the slides are up. Hold on. Yeah, I've got. Hold on, I think I need to take this out.
Yeah, I'm flipping through them now, trying to see. Definitely bring up his slides, Brian.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think it's right in there, and you can see.
Yeah, this is good enough.
Yeah, I think it's like you can extrapolate on it.
Yeah, awesome.
All right, well, right on.
Yeah, I think I'm good.
All right. Well, maybe one day we'll all get together in person.
And yeah, share a beer or two.
Yeah. All right.
As long as it's not Corona.
Right.
We'll be good.
Nice. All right, Bill. Well, thanks
Right.
a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Great presentation, and yeah, let's keep in touch here.
Yeah, totally. Stay safe.
All right, too.
All right, man.
All right,
Bye.
thanks everyone.
Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.